out all others from the marketplaces in Alexandria and then Constantinople, where the Arab merchants offered their exotic wares for sale while concealing what they knew of their origin. In 1453, however, in a devastating siege, Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turks and was sacked by the invading army, ending what remained of the Byzantine Empire. The fall of Constantinople placed the spice trade entirely in the hands of the Ottomans, who soon raised taxes and increased tariffs to virtually shut off the spice supply to infidel Europe. During the late 15th century, however, the Portuguese discovered a sea route to the east by pushing south along the coast of Africa and around the Cape of Good Hope, conquering numerous East African cities and founding the colony of Goa on the western coast of India in 1510. A few years later, Portuguese adventurers seized cities in Indonesia, where they constructed fortified settlements to dominate and control the local spice trade. Soon, Portugal was one of the richest nations in Europe, boasting a complex trade network that extended around the world. But in its very success was the kernel of Portugal's downfall. The nation had a population of only 2 million, and the eastern spice trade, with its continuous wars, shipwrecks, and deaths from disease, took a heavy toll on Portugal's small population of males. To keep the enterprise running, Portugal hired foreign sailors, who soon shared the knowledge of this astonishing wealth. Others also wanted a share of the spice trade. Beginning in 1519, in one of the greatest voyages of all time, a Spanish expedition led by the disaffected Portuguese nobleman Ferdinand Magellan circumnavigated the world by sailing around South America, crossing the Pacific Ocean, and establishing a Spanish presence in the Spice Islands. Despite their quarreling, the Spanish and Portuguese reaped great profits by monopolizing the spice trade in Europe for decades. In the mid-16th century, dynastic politics in Europe resulted in Charles V, the ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, inheriting the throne of Spain, as well as the dukedom of Burgundy, and the provinces in the north, roughly in the region of today's Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. In 1549, these provinces became an independent state under the emperor's rule. When he abdicated the throne in 1555 to devote his life to the church, he divided this vast and unwieldy empire between his brother Ferdinand and his son Philip. While Ferdinand retained control of the old Holy Roman Empire, Philip became king of Spain and the newly created Spanish Netherlands. The powerful chartered cities of this region were vital to the prosperity of the Spanish crown. In 1580, Philip annexed Portugal, uniting the competing nations under one monarchy and one spice monopoly. The Protestant Reformation interrupted this cozy arrangement. In 1567, King Philip sent the ruthless Duke of Alva and an army of Spanish soldiers to the Netherlands to put down a revolt and collect a new series of taxes on the cities of the lowlands. On February 16, 1568, the Inquisition declared that all 3 million citizens of the Netherlands, apart from a few exceptions, were heretics and were therefore condemned to death. Now Philip ordered Alva to carry out the Inquisition's sentence. The cities of the lowlands, chafing under their financial burden, Alva's brutal massacre, and the execution of thousands of citizens by rope, fire, and sword, rose in revolt. Declaring the Spanish to be cruel, bloodthirsty foreign oppressors, they coalesced around the leadership of William III of Orange. Since Spanish rule was strongest in the southern Netherlands, most leading merchants and capital fled north during the conflict, as economic and religious refugees from Spanish and Catholic rule. The prime beneficiary of this movement of wealth and knowledge was the city of Amsterdam. For decades in the late 16th century, Spanish and rebel armies clashed inconclusively, effectively shutting down the port of Antwerp, and with it Portuguese commercial access to northern Europe. Amsterdam merchants began sailing to Lisbon to acquire spices until 1595, when King Philip shut down Lisbon, and thus closed Europe's spice center to merchants from the Netherlands. This closure gave the merchants of what was becoming one of the greatest trading centers of northern Europe the incentive to launch their own voyages to the east. 3. In 1592, a Dutch traveler named Jan Hougen van Linschoten returned from an 11-year journey throughout the East Indies in the service of Portuguese merchants. "My heart," he mused, "is longing day and night for voyages to faraway lands." In 1596, he had completed and published his travelogue, Itinerario, a detailed guide to the peoples and products of India and Indonesia. Itinerario was a route map to the wealth of the Portuguese trading network, the native kingdoms, their customs and interests, the goods they desired and the goods they traded. A sort of commercial Lonely Planet guidebook for merchants new to the region. In it, von Linschoten described for the first time the original locations of cloves, nutmeg, mace, cinnamon, and other spices, blending his account with quaint observations of their daily uses. "The Indian women," he recorded, "use much to chaw cloves, thereby to have sweet breath, which the Portugal's wives that dwell there do now begin to use." Regarding nutmeg and mace, he related that the fruit is altogether like great round peaches, the inward part whereof is the nutmeg. This fruit of apples are many times conserved in sugar, being whole, and in that sort carried throughout India and much esteemed. The wandering Dutchman described the great benefits of all the spices, in case anyone still doubted that these were amazing substances. The historian Bernard Vlecker writes in his Nusantara, A History of Indonesia, that Linschoten also avowed, and again probably many others brought the same information, that the Portuguese Empire in the East was decayed, rotten, and tottering, a structure which would collapse if given even a moderate blow, or to change the metaphor, it was a plum ripe for the picking. To Dutch merchants, flushed with idle capital and waging war against Spain for their independence, this was